Hi, I'm Tara, and welcome to Let's Do Books. Email me at tara@thelesbianreview.com with any questions or comments, or come join the Facebook group, The Lesbian Review Book Club. I'm super excited because I'm joined today by the awesome lesbian romance author Kris Bryant, who I'm a huge fan of. Her latest book is Touch, which has been newly released by Bold Strokes Books, and it's available everywhere. Kris is here today to talk about other people's books, though. Authors are readers too, so I'm asking her about what lesbian fiction books she loves. So welcome, Kris.
Thanks for having me.
So, what books do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm a romance writer, so I definitely prefer to read romance. And my go-to writer, my crush, is Georgia Beers. She writes exactly what I want to read. She's very... It's a good, solid, emotional, and heartfelt book. Anytime I pick one up, I know that it's a feel-good. It's going to give me all the feels. So the first book I wanted to talk about is Starting from Scratch. And the story is about Avery, who's a graphic designer, and she has kind of the perfect life that she wants. She's successful, she has good friends, she has a dog she loves, and she's single. But it's kind of her journey on finding the perfect person in an imperfect way. So I really enjoyed the journey of finding somebody. We all have a crush, and so she ends up kind of, I don't want to give it away, but I guess I have to. She kind of hooks up with her crush, and it's such a great story. It's such a feel-good story, and there's really nothing wrong with that book. It's perfect to me.
She's so good. I just finished her latest Right Here, Right Now, and it's also... highly recommend it. It's one of my favorite romances that I read in all of 2017.
Nice. Yeah, I heard in P-Town she read from it a couple of times, and I love it when I hear her voice in her books. So that's always fun for me. So I'm like, oh, that sounds something like Georgia would say. And so it was a toss-up between this book and Too Close to Touch.
Oh, that's a favorite.
Yeah, because, I'm in the corporate America now, and I love that whole concept of falling for your boss, or it's such an appealing thing to me, the storyline. So it was a toss-up, but I ended up picking Starting from Scratch. A little bit favorite. It's more of a favorite for me. And
it's kind of one of the perfect places to start with her books, I think. I don't think there's a bad place to start with her books, but it is like, if I was going to recommend just one book, that's probably one of them that I would suggest.
Right. I know, I agree. There's, like I said, there's nothing wrong with it. She covers everything, and there's perfect. There's beautiful women, there's a dog, there's a kid, and it's just kind of a little bit of everything. And I think it appeals to so many people for that reason, because that there is a child involved. And I love reading books. Actually, one of my books, I added a kid, and it was a challenge for me because I don't have children. So I like to read about them. Because there's so many single moms, and especially women who were with men who have children with men who have found a different way to love. And I think this book and a lot of books with children in them, I think that they're important for us.
Mm-hmm. So what's the next book you want to talk about?
The next book I want to talk about is by Megan Ullrich, and it's Life and Death. And that's the book that a lot of people shied away from, and I think it's a brilliantly written book. It's the story of a married couple with a child who has leukemia, and the child ends up dying, and the family kind of falls apart during the whole... They were giving aggressive therapy to the child, aggressive medical care, attention, trying to heal her. She has leukemia that only 5% survive. Children who have it. And that's not really what the story's about. It's about this family who falls apart because of it, but they also get back together because of the child. So it's so well written, and the story is something that does happen in real life. Children do end up, unfortunately, they do die from certain things, whether it's illness or accident or whatever. And she does a brilliant job on this. It's a great story, and I think it really needs to be heard. And it's one of my favorites.
So who would you recommend this book to?
I would recommend this book to people who want something a little different, people who are more of a challenge to read. It is a challenging book, but it's a very good book, and it's a well-written book. So I think people like me, I like fluff. Like, I like to decompress. I like to grab a romance novel and just read it where there's little angst and not so much, where there's not as much conflict. And that's what I like, because my life is so, it's stressful during the day. And so sometimes just to get away, I need something easy to read. This is not an easy to read book for an emotional level, and also, on a personal level, because it does hit a lot of different things, but it's just so well read, and I really think that people who want something a little more meaningful should read this book.
Okay. So what's your next book?
So that kind of goes along with in the lines of a book that's so well written, and that's The Ada Decades by Paula Martinac. It's a great book. It was a book that I was asked to read for one of the radio shows here in Kansas City. And it wasn't really a book that I would pick up to read, only because it's very historical, and it follows the life of Ada Shook for like 7 decades. And they're all little short stories, but they all involve her and important events that happened in society throughout the 70 years of her life. Let's see, we have gay rights. Gosh, there's so many different ones that she talks about, but it was just so, the character she's so quiet, and you want to protect her, and she's just this quiet hero, and at the end of it, she tells everybody she's not a hero, but she really is. And it's good for people who like history, people who like our history, civil rights, gay rights, just equality for all. It's just a good book to read for that. And I found it really well written.
Yes, that's one that I read too, and I was surprised at how much was packed into such a short page count, because I believe it's less than 200 pages.
Which is...
Or something like that.
Yeah, but you're right. Each story is just very, very powerful. And it's one of those where you read one, you're just like, wow, you take a breath, because it's really heavy, but it's heavy, and it's good to know our history, and she really does a great job of giving you a history lesson without realizing you're getting a history lesson, because you're reading about this woman who's put in different positions and how she survives. And not even realizing she's a fighter, she's a supporter, she's just living her life, and I love that about the book.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the choice to do it as a series of short stories was really wonderful, because it allowed for those jumps in time in a way that made sense, and we didn't feel, or at least I didn't feel, like I was cheated out of anything. They were all, like, you could read each of them kind of as their own contained story, but as a whole, getting that experience of her whole life, by the end of it, I just put it down and I was just kind of breathless. It was so beautifully done.
Right. I agree. It's a very heavy story, just because you root for her. You want her to survive. You want her to get through all of this. And you realize that she does it so quietly, but so powerfully. And, you're right. It was one of those where you're like, wow. It was a wow book for me.
Yes.
A wow book.
So, who would you recommend that one to?
Anybody who likes history. There are a lot of people, a lot of readers who really like historical romance or historical fiction. And it's a historical fiction, but there's so much truth to it, and that's the one thing I do like about historical anything, romance fiction, whatever you want to call it, that there is so much truth in it. And there's so much history and research that a writer has to go through just to make it work. And I can really appreciate that, because, just doing research in contemporary stuff, it takes forever. So historical stuff, you have to get right. And she does a great job. Changes the names to protect the innocent. But it's great. It's absolutely, it's a great book.
So what's your next one?
My next one is kind of a fun book. It's actually a very fun book. It's Demon Shemons by KB Draper. She is an indie writer here out of the Kansas City area. It's a book that's snarky and fun, and the main character, you really relate to her right away. And she makes it fun. She's a it all starts off when she's in high school. She accidentally interrupts a spiritual, how do I want to say this without saying too much, but she interrupts this exchange of spiritual powers from a Native American tribe, from like the chief down to the heir of this spirit that is a demon hunter. And she accidentally stumbles upon it, and she takes the role of the spirit hunter. The story is she can't give it back for 10 years, so she has this for 10 years. And so she tries to ignore it. She goes to college, she becomes a cop. She tries to ignore it, but it's too much for her. So she and the Danny, her sidekick, who is actually supposed to inherit this power, they go and they kind of fight demons. And there's something that happens in Mississippi, and it's the whole story is hilarious, and you don't realize you're reading something that's really, oh my gosh, it's not all this angst and stuff. She approaches it in such a fun way that you don't even realize you're reading paranormal. It's just like an average person who just like, hey, whatever. But it's a great story. I'm not one for paranormal, but I really really enjoyed this one. So I think anybody who likes paranormal and they like something different, and this is definitely both of those. So I highly recommend it.
So does it have a romance to it?
There is a romance. She does have she does meet somebody in the story, and there is a romance. It's certainly not the focal point of the story, but there is romance there, and she does a good job. So it's very entertaining. So it covers everything. It covers crime, paranormal, romance, intrigue. There's so much going on. There's chasing. And the ending is fantastic. It's got a great ending.
Okay, cool. I was wondering, because Sheena's coined this term called the incidental lesbian, who we're seeing more and more in lesbian fiction, because romance has and continues to kind of dominate the lesbian industry, right? Like that's where all the money's being made, and that's fine. But we're starting to see more and more books where it's not about the experience of being a lesbian. It's like more incidental that the character is gay or is bisexual or whatever. So I was wondering if it was kind of one of those, like, she's a demon hunter who incidentally
happens to be a lesbian. I agree.
Right.
Yeah, that's what it is. I mean, they're actually, as bad as this sounds, and I don't know that I should even confess this, but I do read some mainstream books if I want a certain type of book, just because I know I can pick up something and read it real quick and get whatever it is I need. And I love that now lesbian fiction is turning to that. So I love that whole idea, because there, you can read romance and you can kind of get too much of it. And so then I need something a little different to kind of cleanse my palate and move on to, another book. But yes, this is definitely one of those books.
Yeah, that's very cool. So do you have any more books?
The last book I thought of talking about, discussing, I wanted to talk about Lynn Ames, her book, All That Lies Within. Yeah. I read Lynn Ames when I first started reading lesfic. I got lucky. I picked a couple of writers that I had no idea. I was so new to the whole industry, and I got a Kindle, and I was like, oh my gosh, look at all these books, especially romance. And so I just randomly picked some, and I got lucky with that one. And I really enjoyed it because I liked the idea of somebody who was already famous, and her character, who's already famous, and then also wanted the private life. And so she writes under a pen name, and nobody knows who she is. Lynn Ames really calms me. Her books calm me. They always have. And like, I always end up reading her in the airport. Always, because she calms me before a flight. And I don't know if it's the whole spiritual connection that she brings out in some of her books. She does discuss angels or people who can talk to the other side. And there's a little bit of brush on this topic in this book, but it's predominantly romance. And the appeal that I had was just the whole the secret life of somebody famous being somebody not famous, but ends up being famous, and the whole pen pal connection. And it's interesting because I looked up the date, And the date was like 2013. And she's talking about writing pen pals, something like that. And maybe it was just a different publication date or copyright date. I don't know. But it was interesting to me that it was letters that she and this professor, Rebecca Minton, that they go back and forth. They write actual letters and mail them. Now it's email. I pretty much check my emails and, I just respond back. I haven't seen a real letter in forever. I can't tell you the last time I got a letter from anybody.
No.
I got some Christmas cards, but yeah, nobody, it's such a dying thing. Writing letters is a dying thing. So
it's such a beautifully written book. It's so easy to just immerse yourself in it.
Agreed.
And I think that's one of the things I like about Lynn Ames' writing is that it is so immersive. Like, you can just pick it up. Any of the ones I've read anyway, you can pick it up and just like shut the world away. I remember, I'm trying to think, it was probably late last year, I picked up Final Cut. Mm-hmm. And I was just like throwing goldfish crackers and the iPad in the corner of the room so my kids would leave me alone so I could just read this book because it's so good.
Yeah. Oh, we have so many good writers, covering all different genres, and it's really hard to narrow it down. It really is. But by far, those are 5 of my favorites. We have a lot of trilogies. I've noticed a lot of series are coming out, more series, and it's a good thing and a bad thing, because sometimes series really make it and sometimes they just drag down. But I love it. I love series. I love, but I like the immediate. I need to have the second book. I need to have the third book. I need to maybe know about the series after they're all written, and then I can read them. Like Maggie Cummings, she did the Bay West series, and it was a series, and it's not really lesfic, or it's not really romance. It's just kind of general lesfic. I mean, there is romance there, but it's just a society of lesbians who make it work in New York City, and it's a great series for people who aren't really looking for romance, but it's in there, but they want the whole general experience of just fiction. And it's a great series too. So there's just so many things out there. It's hard to recommend, narrow it down because there's just so many good ones out there. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you review books. There's no way. There's too many out there for me to narrow down and pick. I don't know how you do it.
I'm kind of lucky because I get to choose which books I review, and I only review the books that I love. I do think there's a time and place for critical reviews, but I also don't believe that I need to be the person who does them. And it means that I can choose to stop reading books that I'm not loving. So I'm kind of always reading something I love, and it's like a total blessing. Where it would be hard is if somebody said, give me your top 5 books. Mm. That would be...
Like you just did to me. Okay, thanks.
I know. Isn't it awful? I don't know if I could do it. I do a top 10 list every year, and I sneak like 1 or 2 extra books on it.
Yeah, it's hard to know. There's no way. I could not pick my 10 favorite because there's so many different... another one is Missouri Vaun and Whiskey Sunrise. It was a historical romance. Loved it. That's a good one. It's about bootlegging and just there's so many good things out there and so many good topics, and it's so hard to narrow it down. It really is. But there's so much to choose from, and I don't think anybody can ever say there's no good fiction out. There's no good lesfic, because that's not true. There's so much out there. I wish I had more time to read. Mm-hmm. Especially late, because we get so many books out, and it's hard. I have to pick and choose, and then I'll give myself maybe a day or 2 to read a book, and then I have to go back to my stuff, and then 12 more books come out, and then I can only pick one, and I read it 2 months later, and then this person asked me to read this book, and I try to fit it into my schedule. It's really hard, and it's got to be hard for you. You raising a family, reading all the time, working. It's just...
I am not a naturally creative person. I cannot write, although I am married to a writer and I write about books. I can't draw worth a damn. My 6-year-old draws better than I do. and I'm not musical or anything like that, but I feel like actually writing about fiction lets me have a creative outlet in a way, because it also lets me take the excited energy I get from reading a book I love, and I get to put it somewhere and do something with it, and hopefully somebody else picks up on that energy and says, oh, this actually sounds really cool, I want to buy it, or oh, this doesn't sound like it's for me, but maybe I'll go buy this other book that got recommended or something. So it's fun, and I think it's the thing that lets me have balance, because I do have a family and I do have a day job, and even at that day job I get to sort of be creative, but it's not the same, like, which is pretty cool.
It is. I got into writing because I've been reading forever. My whole life I've been reading.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like I could add something to it. I never really, I love poetry. I've always written poetry, but I never really thought I could write a book until I did it. I just thought, well, I'll give it a try. And the good thing is when you submit a book to somewhere, nobody knows. It's just you and the person on the other end who's going to read it. And if it's crap, they'll just say, sorry. We thank you, and sometimes people will give criticism, constructive criticism. They'll just say, look, we like the idea, but it's not what we're looking for. We want something else instead. But I think if you are a reader, I think a lot of readers read so much and then they're like, okay, maybe I can do this, and they can. So many readers and proofreaders, especially where my publishing house, they have become writers themselves. Maybe we'll see something from you one day.
I was a proofreader of Bold Strokes for a little while. I proofread Whirlwind Romance.
Ah, look at that. Well. Now you know all about storm chasing here in the Midwest.
I know all about it now. I can practically do it myself.
I miss Maddox. He was a great dog. Not real, but he was a great dog in the book.
So is there anything else that you want to say about your journey as a reader?
As a reader, I can just say that reading lesfic, it obviously really changed my life. I had read it for 2 years and then just decided to, because it is kind of a small niche in the whole literary world. I thought, this is it for me. I am a lesbian. I can write books about, romance between two women because I've experienced it, so I can do it. And I just read everything I could for years, for 2 years, and then I decided to write something. And so now I'm doing both. I'm reading and I'm writing, and then it's hard, with the job, full-time job, and my dog. She requires a lot of attention too. So, but gosh, there's just so much out there now. So much is out there for any type of reader. Whatever you want to read, it's out there. It's available in our genre, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Well, where can people find you online if they want to connect with you, Kris?
They can go to my website, which is krisbryant.net, or they can email me krisbryantbooks@gmail.com. They can also go to the Bold Strokes Books website, or even Amazon page. I'm pretty much, you're either going to get me or the baseball player, so if it's a dude, it's not me. If you see a girl, it's me.
Well, that's all for this episode. Thank you so much, Kris, for joining me.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been fun.
So, I'm Tara. You've been listening to Les Do Books. Don't forget to email Tara at the Lesbian Review with your questions or comments. And actually, if you're an author and you're interested in coming on the show to talk about books that you love, send me an email too. You can also join our Facebook group, the Lesbian Review Book Club, to talk about these books and anything else you're reading and loving. You can also find me and all the other podcasters on the Lesbian Talk Show channel at our Facebook group, the Lesbian Talk Show chat group. If you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to rate this show and subscribe. To find this and many other great shows, all you need to do is search for the Lesbian Talk Show on iTunes, Podbean, or Stitcher.